My name is Darren Griggs. I am a junior on the Hill this year, and my major is social work and my minor is psychology.
My name is Sidonia Brown. I'm a sophomore on the Hill, and my major is child studies.
Okay. My name is Ashira Gibbs. I am a sophomore in the Honors College. I'm a major in marketing and dance minor.
I'm Patrice Powell. I'm also a sophomore in the Honors College, and I'm majoring in dietetics and nutrition.
My name is Devon Taylor. I am a sophomore on the Hill, and my major is broadcasting journalism with a minor in criminology.
Hi, my name is Alexis Watkins. I am a second semester junior on the Hill, majoring in entrepreneurship with a minor in performing arts administration.
Well, mostly I'd say that as far as race, like me being one of the only minority black students in the classroom, whenever there is a subject that's controversial or racially controversial in any way, most of what happens is people look at me, and they'll look at me and wait for my opinion, or how do you feel about things, and and things like that. So mostly it's just, I don't know if it's uncomfort or fear or disagreement, I don't know what it is, but somehow it always ends up focused on the minorities whenever that comes on. So
when that happens, how does it make you feel?
It's like, I just wish they could understand that. Like, I heard somebody say the other day that it's very difficult when people force you to speak on behalf of all of the black community, because you're one person, you know what I'm saying? You're one person, and they want you to speak on how everybody's supposed to feel about this, and it's not that simple because everybody has their own opinion, but we're all dealing with the same collective struggle, So I just wish they could understand that,
I don't think race has affected me as much as it does other students, but I do feel like I'm part of the students of color who always feel intimidated when they're in a class full of all white students. I know, like, me and a lot of my friends often feel like we have to prove ourselves more than other people just because we're different, and people will automatically just look at you more because you're not like the majority. But in terms of how classes are taught, I don't think it's that different. I know, especially with some history classes, some of my friends feel uncomfortable when they talk about African American history and stuff, but I had the pleasure of being in a history class where the professor, he was actually showed like genuine interest in that subject and didn't make us feel uncomfortable when he was teaching us about it. So I think that's one experience that had the pleasure of having, but I know a lot of students don't get to have those type of experiences.
So we talked about this some last night. There was nothing specifically we could think of that has impacted us personally.
Mm-hmm. Because I have a lot of science and math courses, and we don't really talk about race, so it doesn't really come up, and I don't really think about it unless it's brought up or something. Mm-hmm. So it hasn't impacted me personally.
I think it has in some ways, just because, again, some topics are, I guess, very sensitive when you talk about it in class. So sometimes people don't want to say things that are offensive instead of just saying what they honestly believe in. And I think that a lot of times that stops good discussion in classrooms. So I think something that would help with that is just being able to get in a relationship with your scholars to make sure that they feel comfortable in the classroom. Of course, comfortability is a huge thing in the classroom. As for me, I know in history classes, in my communications class, that I had, I was actually the only African American male in my communications class, and some things, as the only African American in there, I was like, well, is this appropriate to say? Is this not appropriate to say? So I can definitely understand how race played a big role in my higher education.
Not as far as the content in the course, but 9 times out of 10, I was always the only African American female in the class, or African American student in the class. And so it kind of made it a little bit harder to connect with my professors in a way. And I felt like when we did group projects, I would have to kind of be thrown into just any group, if that makes sense.
A few. One of them was, let's do the one from last year. Okay. I was in a political science class last year, and the class was set up as a debate. So basically, she would bring up an issue, and everybody would put in their input on it, and we'd just go back and forth, and that's how we would do for the class. But I remember one time, there was a kid, and I remember he sat right behind me. I remember all the details of the situation. So he sat right behind me, and he tried to explain to us that racism in the United States is not an issue anymore. And that he said, and I quote, "I don't understand what the big hoopla about racism is, about slavery is, when white people were enslaved too." That's what he said, and he tried to argue that entire classroom about it. And I was like in the back of my head, he's entitled to his opinion, of course. However, it's just like, for you to bypass 400 years of oppression for a people that was kind of very ignorant for you. You know what I'm saying? So for me, it was like, and once again, when that happened, everybody looked at us, like me and every other black person in the classroom. And I could tell that everybody was equally as uncomfortable as I was. So I was like, why does this happen? Why do people feel like they can just say ignorant stuff off the top of their head? You know what I'm saying? So that's what my major issue was. That's one of those times.
How do you feel that your instructor reacted in that sense?
Well, my instructor was a black woman. So, but most of what she did, instead of like trying to argue with him, and not just for this situation, she did this for most of the class. Most of what she did was she would try to de-escalate the situation, and she would try to like play devil's advocate all the time. You know what I'm saying? She would try to like fight your point with another point. You know what I'm saying? So, and I understand why she did that, because she was trying to get us to understand that not everybody's going to agree with us, and this is what they'll say if you say this, da, 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 da. I get that. But in this particular instance, instead of like putting in some devil's advocate from our point of view, she would just more try to keep it from escalating any further. So.
And how did her way of handling that make you?
I'm not gonna get on her about it, because it's like, if I was in the same circumstance, I don't know what I would do, you know what I'm saying, as an instructor, as a professor in a college, you know what I'm saying? But at the same time, it's like, part of me just wishes she would have said something, you know, like said anything to him to educate him that he was wrong, you know? But I guess she did what she needed to do as an instructor, so.
Okay, I had two that came to mind when I was thinking of this question, and I wouldn't call them like explicitly racist, but just like questionable behavior. So the first one was in a class for my major, and we were divided into groups and just talking in our groups. And I went up to one of my friends who is also African American. She was the only African American girl in her group. And she was like, "You won't believe what I just heard." And I was like, "What?" And she was like, "Some girl in my group was upset because in her other classes, she was the only white girl in her group, and she said that she felt discriminated against." And that was just kind of weird to me, because I was like, that's how some students of color feel every single day when they're in groups full of just white students. And it made me think, like, even though in that one moment she might have been the odd one out, I was like, I guarantee the majority of her professors are white, the majority of her classmates are white, the majority of people at this institution are white. And that one moment she felt when she was being discriminated against, people feel like that every single day. And so the second one was in a communications class of mine. We were having a debate, and the topic was, should college be free? And I was on the side of college should be free, and one of my arguments was college should be free because it would allow more students of color to enroll, since a lot of students of color come from low-income families. And I use Berea College as my evidence, and how its diversity is so much more vast than other institutions, and how that correlates to more students of color being able to enroll because it's a tuition-free college. And one girl on the opposing side, her counter argument was along the lines of there are enough students of color in universities, or there's enough diversity in universities. And the word that stuck out to me a lot is enough. Like, why should there be enough students of color? There's never enough diversity, and there's always room for more. So that just kind of stuck out to me, that there are some people who think there's enough of us on campus and there's enough of us being enrolled into universities, when I don't think that's the case at all.
How did your instructor react to that comment? Do you remember any reaction?
I think she was very nonchalant. And of course I got upset about it because I was like, how could someone say something like that? And all of my other teammates, as far as I can remember, I was the only student of color in that group. They were like, it's just a debate, calm down, like it's fine.
How did that make you feel?
I felt like they didn't understand. And of course, like, it's hard for people to understand something they can't relate to.
And how would you have wanted your professor or the classmates to react differently if you could have?
I feel like just having more empathy and just putting themselves into the shoes of someone, even if you can't directly relate to them, to just try and see how, like, someone could have gotten offended by that comment even though you're not offended by it. Like, I don't think anything drastic needed to be done because, of course, like, she was just making a comment based off of what she knew, and it might have been offensive in some ways, but I just think everyone having, like, an open mind and seeing how some things you say has an effect on other people.
We actually haven't, so that's been pretty good.
Yeah. Definitely great.
I have not experienced a racial, biasness in a classroom, but I have on campus. There was a time that I went to a party, and I won't say who they are, of course, for confidentiality, but I was actually told that no were allowed at the party. And I had some other friends with me, and of course we instantly got offended, and we were just like, hey, that's not cool. So we reported that to the higher authorities, and that was taken care of.
And how did you feel like in that party, the people that were hosting it, how do you feel like that they reacted and responded?
It was more of a embarrassing thing. I hate to say it like that, but that was my first time that I had ever been racially slurred, and nobody stood up at all. Nobody. Like, you would think you had one or two people who would stand up and say, hey, that's not cool. Nobody stood up for us. So my group that I was with, we felt antagonized, we felt embarrassed, and more than anything, I think I felt angry because, again, that had never happened. And I've always heard that college is the place where you can come and you can be yourself, and you don't really have to encounter those things. Everybody's supposed to be mature here, right? But it definitely made me very angry because that was the first time that I had been racially slurred by somebody. So it definitely made me uncomfortable and a lot more aware that people are like that.
I have. It was in a music class, and it wasn't any derogatory or mean thing said. I had my natural hair out, and I would style my hair differently very often, and my teacher would call my hair interesting. So it was just for me to be the only African American within that class and in that cohort, it was just a little, I don't think my teacher understood that it might have been a compliment, but it seemed like a backhand compliment.
Did your classmates react in any way, or was it more personal?
I think it was just more personal and internalizing that, because I think in the culture that we live in, people just think, they speak before they think about it, and they don't realize what they're saying or how it could be taken across to the next person.